Namaskar. In this session today, we are going to talk about the National Education Policy 2020. There has been a lot of debate and discussion about the policy, and perhaps amongst all the policies of the government, this policy has been most discussed in the school education sector, in the universities, colleges, amongst teachers, and also amongst other stakeholders. It has been nearly 1.5 years since the 29th of July 2020. This policy was approved by the Central Cabinet and put on the public platform. Perhaps we all have understood the policy, praised the policy, and largely it is believed that this policy is a very forward-looking policy which is going to transform the education sector of this country. This is a departure from the way previous policies were conceived or projected. This policy intends to present a new way of thinking, what some call a nationalist way of thinking, and transforming education right from school education up to higher education and research, which would be in the times to come called nationalist. So the topic we have taken today is, will National Education Policy 2020 transform Indian education? When we intend to answer the question, will it transform, we also need to ask, what do we intend to transform? What is to be transformed? What is to be changed? And if there is something to be changed, there can be two questions. Either times have changed, so the education sector needs to change, or there was something wrong which needs to be changed. Without such a debate and discussion, we cannot really understand the intention of the policy. So we need also to ask, why a policy? We all understand why education. Education changes lives, and good education changes lives faster. Someone who had 8 years of schooling would earn more, will live a better life than somebody who has never been to a school. This is proved by research and everybody accepts it. Someone who has done schooling, that is 12 years of schooling, leads a better life. And similarly, the higher you go up in education, the thinking, the approach of those who are well educated changes. So education changes lives. We must try to understand, what is it in education? What do we do in education that changes lives? A corollary to this issue can be, good education changes lives faster. It is said that the day a child is admitted to a primary school, the fate, the future of that child is decided. There are grades of school. Some are very good schools. I would not attempt to define that very good school today here, but I will leave it to the understanding, notion, belief of people on what is a good school. And some are not so good school. So if a child gets admission to a good school, that day it is decided the child will land up or come out with flying colors, or land up better than those who could not get admission to a school which was considered good school. I do not want to generalize, but then the general feeling in our country is that if you are going to a private school, perhaps you are better placed, your future is secure. And if you are going to a government school, the public school, the fait is accompli, you will not go much higher. Exceptions are Kendriya Vidyalaya and Navodaya Vidyalaya. I'm mentioning these names so that in times to come, perhaps my colleagues in the academia will take up research on these issues and prove or disprove what I'm mentioning here today. The Kendriya Vidyalaya and the Navodaya Vidyalaya have gone away or defied the definition of a government school. So one needs to study how is it that the municipal corporation schools of the government, the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, the Delhi Municipal Corporation, the Calcutta Municipal Corporation schools, which are run by the government, do not perform well in comparison to the Kendriya Vidyalaya and the Navodaya Vidyalaya, which are both government. There can be many issues: the monitoring, the expenditure, and so on and so forth, the quality of teachers, the selection of teachers, the training of teachers. All these impact schools. So we need to study how well trained are the government school teachers in a municipal corporation compared to Kendriya Vidyalaya and Navodaya Vidyalaya. How much does the government spend on municipal corporation school per child expenditure compared to a child in Kendriya Vidyalaya and Navodaya Vidyalaya? All these become issues of research and we need to answer them. We also need to question what is the regulatory structure, who decides on issues. The most important issue is access to school, that means admission to a school. But equally important is, what do we teach to these children? What is the curriculum? So who decides on the curriculum? It's well known. There is a set process that we have a national curriculum framework, and based on that curriculum, the textbooks are written. Children study these textbooks, but just as government develops its own textbook, the NCERT, the SCRTs have also that responsibility. There are private agencies which develop textbooks. Content is the king. What do we teach to children? We live with these ideas all through our lives. So, what is it that they read? This policy says it is not India-centric, it is Bharat-Kendrit. Is there a difference between India-centric and Bharat-Kendrit? Have we been designing and developing India-centric, and what was that? The example that people normally give is, if children who studied in schools went to university and they shouted slogan Bharat Tere Tukre Honge, Insha'Allah, Insha'Allah, then what did we teach them? This policy says 2030, 2040, intents at least. Intents at least. It doesn't say in all many words. 2030, 2040, our children would say, Bharat Ma, hum tumhare liye hain. और तुम ही से हम हैं, हम ही से तुम हो, हम तुम्हारे लिए ही पढ़ते हैं और तुम्हारे लिए ही काम करेंगे. तो let us examine the curriculum that we made 2000, that's National Curriculum Framework 2000, 2005, and every time there is a debate discussion on a school curriculum, it is said, why do all our children who pass school aspire only to get into IITs and such institutions which are most helpful for migrating to the developed countries? What did we teach them? Did we teach them, oh, the destination or the token of learning, good learning, is getting a job in the US, the UK, Europe? Is there something wrong in the curriculum? We need to examine that. So, when we try to examine, will NEP 2020 transform Indian education 2030, 2040? We will have to ask these two questions. One, are all schools equally good as far as quality is concerned? public, private. Visit a government school, visit a public school where expenditure perhaps is more than a private school. But why is it that government schools look so shabby? Children, it's always said, children come walking to the school and go running from the school. They don't like to come to school. Why? Why can we not make schools more entertaining, more pleasurable? They like to come. And they don't like to go back. They like to be there. So first is the school, the milieu, the teachers, the environment. The second is the content. We need to examine if we wish that NEP 2020 will transform this nation and will have a different set of people, which set different set of thinking, 20, 30, 40, in fact 40, because we need perhaps 15 years, then what is to change? National curriculum framework, do we have our eyes on it? And are we planning that way? These are questions which we need to raise and answer at this point of time. Because once the national curriculum framework is made, we will not be able to change it for the next 10, 15 years. The last national curriculum framework was 2005. It is 2021, 2022. We have not been able to change. So we need to keep our eyes. NEP 2020 will not transform, let me conclude, as far as the school education is concerned, if we do not have a very Bharat Kendrit curriculum framework. Another very important issue is that why is it that only 26.3% of the school children could migrate to higher education? The policy says at the moment we have only 26.3% of the relevant age group in higher education. Through the Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and various other schemes, we have succeeded in bringing practically all children to school. 100% enrollment of the relevant age group, 6 to 14 and 14 to 18. But how and where did the children drop out, lose on schooling, and only 26.3% reached higher education? Can we conclude that school education has failed 76%, even if we take this data? So what needs to change? Ultimately, what we require to examine is who decides on these issues. The regulatory framework is most important. We are talking about national education policy because policies impact and influence a nation, change a nation. Today, we are talking or interacting in English is a gift of Macaulay's Minutes or Macaulay's policy of 1835. We have not been able to undo this. Perhaps the changes 2020 will bring will not be subverted. Perhaps 22. It will have long-term impact. So perhaps most of the children from the first generation, the less privileged, could not continue and they dropped. That is why only 26.3% in higher education. I have often been asked, what policies should be made for the scheduled caste, for the scheduled tribe, for the girls, for the less privileged, for the disabled? Let us not forget, reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe has been there for more than 100 years. It was introduced by the British government. And why is it that not more than 5% of the children or adults of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe are in professions? That means reservation alone doesn't work. I'm concluding like that. I think my colleagues will do research. Reservation alone will not do unless and until we change the schooling process. We transform the way they are educated. The children from these groups, the girls. We have all along been saying we wish to promote our girls, but what are the policies? I'm reminded of a couple of policies which I would like to mention, because I wish you take up or think in a different way and bring in such idea. We had introduced the idea of giving bicycle to girls who go to class 9. And we have seen good results because they could avoid the harassment on the road from home to school because they were riding a bicycle. And parents in Bihar bought scooty for their girls when they passed class 12 and they went to college. It was an impact of the bicycle scheme that the girls were promoted. Parents also, initially they were hesitant, but then later they accepted and they appreciated. Can we have such ideas introduced for the less privileged, for the first generation learners? NEP alone will not be able to transform India 2040 or give a different result unless and until our policy, which has been proposed by this policy of 2020, is implemented in letter and spirit. And that would be done only and only if those who decide on implementing it, who are at the helm of affairs, are those who are stakeholders. They understand schooling. This cannot be done in a bureaucratic manner. Schooling is not a bureaucratic process. It's not like a policeman standing on the road and managing traffic. It's about hand-holding. A teacher cannot mechanically teach. A teacher has to be different teacher to every child, and that can come only through good training and personal contact, emotional contact, moral responsibility. How are we going to infuse that? We had a great tradition of schooling, and we have literature on it. Where did we go wrong? And what did we do? One was the education was supported by the society. It was not government driven. It was not state driven. It was society driven. The society and the school were two sides of the same coin. The society managed and supported schooling or education system because the society understood the importance of education and the cost. So the local village people supported the school in terms of Shramdan. The school buildings were constructed by people from the village. Where did it change? I think, read Wood's dispatch. It says the East India Company was asked to spend at least 1 lakh rupees on education in India. So what was done was, East India Company will collect revenue or taxes, employ people, employ teachers, and they will in turn teach. Why did the British government do it? Because they wanted the teachers to be their servants and not those who were serving the society. If the society supports the teachers, the school staff, then there would be a relationship between the two. The society will exert its pressure and the school will work in collaboration with the society. And this was Indian tradition. The teacher was center stage. The teacher decided which child, which student will pursue what sort of education. Read Prashnopanishad. People have decided how he will go ahead with the students who approached. I will not go into details of that because of the paucity of time, but I will definitely invite you to read Prashnopanishad. The teacher is center stage. On 7th of August 2020, 8 days after the National Education Policy was passed and implemented and was in the public domain, the Prime Minister addressed and said, teachers have to own it. We have brought a policy, but you have to own it. It's only you who can make it a reality. The Prime Minister has realized the importance of teacher, and the teacher has to be center stage. How will this National Education Policy 2020 reinstate the Indian teacher like Pipala was through what we can understand through the Prashnopanishad? Teacher cannot be a servant. When we talk of autonomy, we immediately talk of accountability. True, the teacher has to be accountable, but that accountability cannot be just through an annual performance report or annual confidential report of a teacher. The teachers can fuzz it. So there are ideas introduced in National Education Policy about teachers, unions, and associations. Who can really monitor and guide a teacher? We have suggested that there should be unions of teachers of various disciplines, teachers of English, teachers of chemistry, teachers of biology, and general teachers. They must have their associations where they decide, they exert pressure, they tell someone of their own group who is a good chemistry teacher. I don't think anybody from outside the discipline of chemistry can come and tell a chemistry teacher you are good or bad. This policy has suggested that. If that is implemented, perhaps 2040, we will have a transformed Indian education. Similarly, large number of students drop out of schools in the first initial years, 3-4 years. In 2015, there was a subcommittee of the CABE which studied the phenomenon of out-of-school children. I had the privilege of being a member of that committee. We traveled around the country and talked to children, talked to parents, teachers, and all. Why did you drop out of school? Why did your child drop out of school? And invariably, the answer was, we didn't understand anything in the school, or my child didn't understand anything. Why? Because the children were taught in a language which was not their language. Look at policies. Sargent Report, Wood's Dispatch. Every policy says Indian vernacular languages must be used for transacting curriculum for Indian education, except Macaulay's Minutes. But the British always insisted on English being the medium of instruction, and we have carried with that tradition or legacy, and that is the reason. Even in states where the local language is the medium of instruction, children drop because the major language of the region is not the language of most children. Look at Jharkhand. It is considered a Hindi-speaking state, but large majority of children speak Santhali, Mundari, Khadiya, Ho, Udao. They don't speak Hindi. They may comprehend Hindi, but that's not the language. When it comes to performing in Hindi, they fail. And that was the reason most children dropped. This policy has suggested, recommended that every child be given initial education in the mother tongue. Will that be done? We had a national translation mission within the Central Institute of Indian Languages. It has failed to do that. The policy proposes to have a separate body. We will have to keep questioning whether this new body will be a bureaucratic body or a body of people who are really concerned about providing education in mother tongue. They are passionate about it. Education is about passion. Teachers have to be passionate. How are we going to make passionate teachers? When this issue of teacher training came before us, we had suggested 4 years of B.Ed. Why was that? The 1-year B.Ed was practically 3-4 months of B.Ed. Then it became 2 years. What is it that makes school education or a teacher different? we looked at the teacher training of various countries. Finland has a teacher training program of 5 years. They are not the best paid in Finland, let me tell you. But the social prestige of a teacher is very high, just as it was in the classical India. The teacher was considered highest in the society. Even when the king visited the ashram, the guru's ashram, he will take off his shoes, put off all the arms and armory, and then enter a gurukul. That was the respect given to a guru. And that is why India became Sone ki Chidiya. जहां ज्ञान है, जहां ज्ञान का सृजन है, उसको हमको मंदिर मानना होगा. And this is what this policy also suggests, that teacher has to be center stage. Read chapter 5 and 15 of the policy. Teacher in school education, teacher in higher education, both, and not only the student, the teacher has to continuously develop oneself. That is why it is suggested continuous development programs. How are we going to implement it? Let us not once again bring out or come up with something which puts teacher in a subservient role where someone else examines. It cannot be. While preparing the national school standards or professional standard for teachers, we have to be very careful. It has to be peer directed. America has experimented with different method of teacher assessment. There are very good examples. The American government said that if children of a particular school do not perform well and they get less than 60% or something, the school will be closed. All the students got more than 95%. It is very important to understand the assessment process as well. First is bringing children to school, that is access, what I have already talked about. Then it's curriculum, it's the process through which we run schools. We have to be very careful about deciding on norms and regulations. And then comes the assessment of students. Do we trust our results? Do students trust the result? Does the society trust your board results? Why is it that most students like to go for coaching classes rather than schools? My concern is when people ask 2040, who were those who were involved in making of this policy and how was it implemented? These issues will be asked in 2040. We need to raise these questions today so that we answer and implement a robust policy. How do we assess children? The policy itself says there are about 10,000 teacher education colleges in the country which distribute degree for money. Read 15.1. How did we let these colleges be opened? And if teachers buy a degree, teaching degree, what will they be doing in the schools? The policy came on 29th July 2020. We are in end of January 2022. I don't think any college has been closed. If we are so slow, we'll slowly reach 2040 and we'll have the same set of teachers who will be buying degrees and teaching in the schools. If we want a different Bharat 2040 and this policy to be successful, we immediately need to crack down on those colleges which are selling degrees. We have not done that. And if we don't do now, perhaps 2040, we will not have a different Bharat. We will have the same India. Where people don't trust teachers. Your policy says, the Justice J. Sharma Commission says, out of 18,000 teacher education colleges, there are 10,000 colleges which sell degrees. What will happen to a country? We need to look at that. We have suggested through the policy that the training program will be 4 years. Will it make an impact if the schools are, if the colleges don't change? It won't. If colleges still remain selling degrees, perhaps we'll have the same type of teachers who will be perhaps not eligible to teach. And we need to have teachers of various areas. The policy is very clear about one thing. We have emphasized too much on academic subjects. That was again a British impact. Macaulay very rightly said and very honestly confessed in his minutes, we wish to have Indians who will be brown in color but white in thinking, because we need people who would be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, because they will help us prolong, extend the British rule in India. That was the objective of Macaulay's education policy, and we can see that. Will NEP 2020 change this? Will it create a generation of Indians or Bharatiya who would think in national terms and say, Bharat Mata tere liye? Why is it being emphasized, Bharat Mata tere liye? Because our whole purpose of our focus of education has been only me. If I am studying, if I'm taking good, or if I'm good at education, I will care for myself. I will grow myself. No, that was never the intention of Indian education. It was Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. If people in Pakistan are not happy, if that nation is not happy, it is our concern. If my neighbor is going to bed without food, it's my concern, and only such a person is educated. Sa vidya ya vimuktaye. Would this policy create human beings who will be thinking on such lines? The government of India decided, when we had pandemic, to distribute medicine for COVID-19 to other countries. Some people shouted against it. It was so shameful. Learners from all over the world flocked in India, in Vikramshila, Takshila, Nalanda, to take knowledge, and they were freely taught. It was India's vision. Education, knowledge is to be distributed free. Will we create, or will we have an India of, or Bharat, which thinks in this direction 2040? This policy is very forward-looking. I will only conclude the school education part by saying we need to have a professional body for school education, who decides, or which the commission or body decides on how should quality be maintained in public as well as private schools, the curriculum, the teacher quality, the transaction, the assessment, and certification. In higher education, if we wish this policy to come true in 2040, what the policy has said, that we will be transforming our University Grants Commission. This has been suggested for so many years. I'm reminded of the National Knowledge Commission, which suggested of a regulatory body for education on the lines of the Telecommunication Regulatory Authority, which has the legal powers. There has been a debate that we have public institutions and private institutions. Private institutions charge so much and they hand over substandard degree, but they are all UGC recognized. We have not forgotten the story of 44 deemed universities. They will be de-recognized, they will be retained, they will be de-recognized, they will be retained, and there has been so much smoke about it. Why is it and how is it that the UGC could not decide on it? The result is the National Education Policy 2020 says we will transform the University Grants Commission into a Higher Education Commission of India. Initially, this thought has come from the National Knowledge Commission, which had said we need to have a regulatory authority with legal powers because we don't trust our institutions. An institution provides a prospectus, promises so many things. invites students, and once admitted, they do not provide. Who will decide on it? Institutions are autonomous and regulatory. They are statutory bodies created by acts of parliament or state legislature. By the way, I must add here that there is not a single regulatory authority or statutory body in school education. All are societies. The Central Board for Secondary Education, the National Institute of Open Schooling, the state boards of education, they are all societies, and these societies function under the government. All the countries which are doing good in education, they have complete freedom from the government. Governments keep changing. People from different ideology, different political backgrounds come to power. So it's not against one or the other ideology or political party. It's about a nation. If we want our education to flourish and walk in the direction to make once again Bharat ko sone ki chidiya, then we have to free it from the shackles of the government. It has to be autonomous. Don't forget the history of universities, the modern universities. I'm not talking of Vikramshila, Takshila. They were autonomous anyway, but the modern history, if you look at the war between the state and the church wanted to control academia. Church wanted to control the minds of people through the learned people. The learned people reacted. They said, no, we cannot just do the line of the church. We need to debate, discuss, and arrive at something new, which is autonomous. Institutions have to be autonomous. Autonomy is the backbone of academia. And I'm not talking of anarchy. I'm not talking of anarchy. Radhakrishnan Commission has very well explained the meaning of autonomy. We need to adhere to that. Autonomy would mean autonomy of the institution, the teacher, and the faculty to decide on courses that they will teach, the curriculum that they will decide. I don't think if you look at the governments of the most developed countries, they issue any diktats to the universities. I will have to mention on this platform that the University Grants Commission often issues orders to universities. You do this, you do that. Universities are autonomous. They have been created by acts of parliament or state legislature. We need to re-examine this if we want a country where you have independent mind. What Tagore said, let my country away. It can happen only when you have first students coming out of school who think in national terms, who think for the nation and the globe, and then they are given autonomy to think within the understanding that we are for the nation. Autonomy has definitely been misused, which needs, but that doesn't mean that we will curtail autonomy of institutions. Autonomy is the backbone of academia, and that must be preserved. I'm reminded of the Kanti Viswas committee of the CAPE, subcommittee of CAPE. It's a brilliant report. It says every university has been created through a different act of parliament or state legislature. It is because every university has a different objective. A university in Koraput cannot have the same objectives that the Delhi University will have. It's true. They will all have the same objective of creating larger than size human beings who can think independently, who would be able to give direction to the society. But that doesn't mean that every child who is said you are a graduate will be the same. So we have different acts for different universities. There are no two universities with the same act, except for 2009, when the central government established 15 central universities through one act of parliament. That was never done before. That was only in 2009 that the 15 central universities were done, created. We need to examine that and learn from that. No two universities can be the same. I'm also reminded of the 4-year degree program of the Delhi University. Universities have autonomy. They can toy with a new idea. They can play with ideas. Not necessarily every idea will work. The Delhi University had a brilliant idea of a 4-year degree program. For political reasons, the Delhi University had to withdraw it. But now the national education policy itself accepts and agrees that we will have 4-year degree program. We need to learn from this experience that if we had a leadership in the university which could think ahead of times, we should have permitted that to go ahead. Similarly, other experiments undertaken in the universities, they need to be promoted within the givens. What does the policy now say? That we will have board of governors. In higher education, the major stumbling block has been appointments. I'm sure if we want a different nation based on or the recommendations of the National Education Policy 2020, we need to examine the process of appointments. First and foremost, the appointment of the chief executive officers of the university. Read university acts. Every act says that CEO, the vice chancellor, will be the CEO of the university. I have read in acts, they say they will generate ideas and implement them. They are considered or they are expected to be think tanks who will have novel ideas which will be implemented or experimented with. They can succeed or fail. Have our universities been doing that? We need to look at our process of appointments. One area where the policy clearly says is that appointments will be done by the institution itself. What is the process today? We appoint vice chancellor through a search cum selection committee. Most people don't trust it. Most people don't trust it. Read Sudha Rao report of NIPA. It throws so much light on how vice chancellors are appointed. But the policy says every institution will have a board of governors. And who would be members? Those who employ the graduates. Those who are pass out of the institution. That means alumni. The teachers, the chief executive, the people from the society, they will be in the board of governors. What is the process now? The government decides and appoints. There has been so much difference of opinion because the governors are normally the president of India is the head of academic institutions. When we created private institution, the chancellor, equivalent to the president of India, is some person who is a businessman or one who established the university. And I think public and private institutions are sharing equal numbers as far as students are concerned. We need to re-examine this as well. A number of institutions have been created in recent past where the chief minister has become the chancellor of the university. How will this policy be implemented if we do not have a considered, researched understanding about who will be head of institution? Look at global experiences. A number of universities in the most developed nations have vice chancellors who are not a national of that country. Appointment of a vice chancellor is global. And that is why, if you look at the Times scale for assessing universities, where none of the Indian institution is amongst the first 100, we hardly have people from other states. Appointments are very important, which this policy has said that this will be done through the board of governors. We need to take it very seriously and implement it beyond the policy. Beyond the policy, we need to bring new ideas from institutions from across the globe. Who makes a difference? The vice chancellor, then the teachers, And look at the trend now. How many teachers in a state are from other state? So are our selection processes first? We need to relook at that. We also need to look at the regulatory framework. I have just mentioned about the National Council for Teacher Education, where it has been said that 10,000 colleges out of 18,000 practically sell degrees. What was the National Council for Teacher Education doing all these years? Similarly, other bodies. The policy now says we will close down all these regulatory statutory bodies and put the responsibility of higher education in the Higher Education Commission of India, where a vertical or a department will be on deciding on regulation, which will be light but tight. The body will not be too big, but it will be deciding on norms which will be very tight. We have not perhaps done good regulation. Norms have been changed frequently. Architecture Council, Teacher Council, Animal Husbandry Council, Agriculture Council. Such councils, now the policy says they will all be closed and the acts will be repealed by the parliament and the powers will be given to the Higher Education Commission of India. We need to hasten with it. Does 1 year delay make any difference to a nation? How many students pass out of school every year? How many students pass out of college every year? How many take admission every year? Perhaps the population of small African country or 1/4 of Europe, 1/4 of UK, Sweden, Finland take admission in colleges. Imagine the quantum. Imagine the impact on India and the globe. If we intend to support or be the leaders, we are the youngest nation. And the Prime Minister said while inaugurating the Indian Institute of Teacher Education that we have the capacity to export, to send well-trained teachers to all parts of the world. And our teacher education institutions can do that. Every year, if 50,000 or 1 lakh teachers are passing out of colleges and they are worth nothing, how will we become the global leaders? We need to transform our teacher education colleges. We need to transform our design colleges, engineering colleges, medical colleges, so that this demographic dividend turns into asset. Otherwise, it will be a disaster. And the demographic dividend can only work if education is quality. One image or one idea, if people are asked, how do you assess Indian education? I don't think Indian education system, anybody will give more than 25% marks. So what do we need to change? First, we need to change the school education. Second, we need to change higher education and what has been suggested, what is said in the policy. We are already in 2022. A child who would enter 2022 will pass out in 26, 27. How much time do we have? We need to hasten with it. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be slow. We cannot afford to. If India has given a policy through which it intends to be the world leader, and we don't have time. The third important sector is teacher education, in school as well as higher education. Every time we talk of teacher education, because those at the helm of affairs are not really themselves teachers, they come up with a bureaucratic recommendation for teacher education. Teacher training cannot be a bureaucratic structure. We need to go back again to our scriptures and look at how were good gurus created. How did India create people with character? Through personal interaction and learning. Our teachers will have to be modeled. And how are we going to do? will have to be designed or developed through the policies. Policies are important. The national education policy has given clues. And that is why this policy is one of the shortest after Macaulay's minutes. Look at Kothari Commission. It's a bulky 700-page report. Look at Radhakrishnan Commission, more than 600 pages. Look at Mudaliar Commission on secondary education and similar other reports and commissions. Even 1986 policy, the new education policy, which was given by the Rajiv Gandhi government, is about 180 pages. This is the shortest in about 65 pages. But it hits the bullseye. It says school education has to transform. All those left behind have to come in. Those who come to college have to have relevant education. If they want to do painting, if they want to do dancing, if they want to do agriculture, they must be given that provision and the provision to go out and come in. Similarly, they have to have a different model of assessment. Our model of assessment has failed because most children drop out because of the exam system. And they have learned, at least in the school education, they have learned to fuzz it. Most students go to coaching classes. Fortunately, this policy doesn't talk of coaching ever. It intends to improve the schooling and through which subvert the coaching process. But don't forget, with pandemic, the online education has come in a big way. This has created a parallel model of schooling. We immediately need to do research on what will be the structure of schools, whether face-to-face or online. We should not hasten with new policies, new ideas, which are not really researched and understood, like online education for schools. The 4 pillars we cannot forget. A major tenet of school education is learning to live together. We cannot create good human beings in isolation. Similarly, research is a major stumbling block. India has receded or not really done very well in the area of research. The policy says we'll have a national research foundation. If I'm not embarrassing the government, 2019 policy itself, the finance minister had recommended or said in her presentation to the parliament while presenting the budget, we'll create a national research foundation. 2020, she gives 50,000 crores. 1 year we wasted. I don't know whether the announcement of 2020 budget of giving 50,000 crores to research and 10,000 this year and 50,000 over 5 years, has that been given? If not, then how do we expect research to function? How do we expect teachers and academia to come out with good research output? Research is again a major stumbling block. Institutions which spend liberally on research perform better. How is it that Oxford and Cambridge and Princeton, they have come out with the medicine for corona? We have produced, but our academia could not, because we are not prepared for that. We need to raise questions because we want a different India, Bharat 2040. And the job of teachers, the researchers, is not only to praise, but to raise questions. And we have said, Nindak niyare rakhiye angan kuti chhawaye. It is not Ninda. It's not Ninda. It's only opening eyes. It's only making cautious. We have all accepted. We have all been full of praise for the National Education Policy 2020. But as we have already spent 1.5 years, we are getting worried. So it is not Ninda. So Nindak niyare rakhi angan kuti chhawaye, vin sabun pani vina nirmal det banaye. We are raising these issues before those who are at the helm of affairs, who decide on things. Be careful, be cautious, so that 2040 you are not rejected and said you had no ideas. And don't forget one thing. I'll end with this comment, because there are so many things that we can talk about the national education policy. But I will end by this. The policy of India on education is not in isolation. The world is looking at us. It has global interest. Most best performing institutions have students from India in large numbers, even when fees are very high. The fees are scary, but Indian parents are ready to pay that. If our universities don't perform well, we are feeding the best institution. We are helping them grow richer by the day through our students in two ways. They take away the revenue of India. Indian money is pumped into these institutions, and go to any good institution. Go to Cambridge, go to Oxford, go to Harvard, go to MIT, go to Princeton. You will find sizable Indian population, sizable number of Indian students. They pump out Indian money and the best brains. Who helps a nation grow? The good minds. We are deliberately pushing them out by not creating great institutions, by meddling with institutions and their working. Normally we say, forget the past, look at the future, do good, but that doesn't work in education. You need to learn from your past experiences, your past decisions, and then decide on the future. How did we take decisions in the universities? Who did we appoint? Was the decision that every teacher in higher education should have a PhD, which was decided in the 70s, has helped academia? Has the quality of teachers improved? And when we said we will introduce the national eligibility test, NET exam, has that improved the quality of teachers? We need to assess. Look at the sample of NET qualified. Are they global teachers? Do they have the global capacity and capabilities? Your best teachers migrate. Why? Look at institutions globally. You have the best teachers there from India. How can we stop that? One is, when you don't have a good policy, your students migrate, your economy becomes weaker, your money goes out, and with them, the brain goes out. We take pride on Indians, the diaspora, getting awards when they work in other institutions. We don't realize, or we don't work or research on why did they migrate and how can we subvert that. If we really want the National Education Policy 2020 to be a successful policy, which in the words of Prime Minister makes India into a Bharat, which is Bharat Kendrit, we will have to analyze, decide judiciously, and implement policies which will make India or Indian institution actually Bharat Kendrit. We have large corpus of knowledge through Veds, through Upanishads, and we often discard them by saying, whenever we talk of Indian corpus of knowledge, we say Indian corpus as well as modern. They are most modern. Read your Upanishads. Look at the West. Most of our ideas from the Upanishad has been borrowed or stolen, if I can use that expression. And when they are written in English or German or French, we respect them. But we have forgotten our Upanishads. Go back to Upanishads. The best service to the nation, or the best idea for implementing National Education Policy 2020 would be, we should go back to our scriptures, read them, get the ideas, and examine whether the ideas that have come from the West are original or from the Indian origin, and implement them. We will have to be original so that we can create human beings who are different as they were in the ancient times. The National Education Policy 2020 is a great document with great ideas, but we need to be careful and cautious in implementing. My final comment would be, we have spent 1.5 years. Let us not implement the recommendations mechanically. Let us not report within quote, we have completed 30%, 40%, 60%, 70% of the recommendations have been implemented. It won't work like that. It's not like road construction. It's not constructing a building where we have already completed 4 floors and the target was 3. We are ahead of time. No. Let us examine, have we been able to create children or learners or students who are better today? Let us examine if teachers have contributed more research articles. And if not, then we immediately need to change gears. I have a feeling we are competing, or we are aspiring to say we have completed 30%, 40%, 50%. This will not work. We need to have academics, teachers, stakeholders to be at the helm of affairs. If that doesn't happen, friends, the national education policy will not transform India into a Bharat in 2040 and will again repent. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'm very grateful to the Ramanujam College. Thank you so much. My privilege entirely. Thank you. Namaskar.